Welcome to the Vocal Freedom Podcast. I'm your host, Lee Martin Thomas. Join me and my guest speakers as they discuss the journey they've had with their own voice, as well as light bulb moments, stories, and personal wisdoms. Vocal Freedom is a bi-weekly podcast raising awareness about vocal health and well-being from members of the voice community.
Welcome, listeners. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you're all well. My guest this week is singing teacher Scott Harrison. Scott is a very interesting person to listen to. I would go as far as to say it's important to listen to him and his views, as much like me, he wants to sometimes have the difficult conversations, ultimately to bring about social justice and equality within the arts. I champion his passion on this subject and others and hope you enjoy learning about where he's coming from, how the journey is going, and where he holds value in the power of his voice to speak out for those who are not being heard. So a warm welcome, Scott. Perhaps you could start by explaining to our listeners how you got involved in the world of voice, where you've come from, and more about your experience and journey so far.
Absolutely. So I grew up in a working class family and background in Scotland, in the West Coast. Singing was not really something that people there did.
Okay.
But it was something I always kind of loved, and I kind of got into it because, I've always really been into theatre, but I was quite badly bullied at primary school to the point where I had to move schools. And when I moved schools, I was very aware, because I must have only been about 9 years old or something, or 10 years old. I realised that I had to try and make friends really quickly because I didn't know any of the people in the school where I was at because it was so far away from where I lived. And so they were doing the school musical, they were doing Oliver, and everybody in the class was auditioning for it. So I thought I'd better go and audition for that as well then, so that I can kind of, make friends while I'm there. and I ended up being in the school musical, and it kind of like sparked this love I've always loved music, but singing particularly.
Yeah.
I then trained at Knightswood, which is the kind of official musical theatre school of Scotland, as you were. It's part of the Dance School of Scotland, and I studied musical theatre there for 2 years before I went to GSA and studied musical theatre there for 3 years and did my undergraduate degree there. And then I worked as a professional performer. For many, many years, I worked on big major musicals, on national tours. I worked all over the world. I worked for Disney in Tokyo, and I've worked for, I was in the original Irish cast of Elegies for Angels, Punks and Raging Queens in Belfast, and I've kind of worked all over the place doing lots of different interesting things. I've been very lucky to have a very eclectic career, shall we say.
Yeah.
In that I have done everything from kind of TV films to TV series to musicals to plays, BBC proms and classical music as well. But I've always kind of been a teacher. So I think when I was about 12, I remember saying to my music teacher, I really want to be a music teacher. And the piece of advice he had was, he says, could you teach a class full of yourself? And I said, yeah, I think so. And he said, you'll be fine then. You'll be a good teacher. It's only really in later life that I realised that it's not a class full of myself, especially when you're teaching 12-year-olds. But
Yes.
But yeah. So but I've always been really interested in teaching. Teaching was kind of the first thing I thought I was probably going to do. And even when I was in third year of drama school, they said, Scott's going to be the kind of voice captain for the show because he's really interested in doing vocal warm-ups. And I was kind of, I was actually on the first ever vocal process course with Gillian and Jeremy a way back when I was about 14 or 15, because they actually had a kind of, believe it or not, they had a kids course. Throughout the course of the 4 or 5 days in Glasgow, because they held it at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, as it was then the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama. And so I met them when I was very young, and I just kind of always looked up to everything that they did, and so I was kept in touch with Gillian and Jeremy when I moved to London to study musical theatre. And even when I was 18 and stuff, I was kind of taking part in any kind of courses I could get my hands on, and, you know, doing the Still level 1 and 2, and doing the vocal process work, and just kind of like just trying to get my hands on anything that people would let me do at 18. And I was also very lucky just before I moved down as well, that I was helping out with a local amateur dramatics company when I was 16, and they asked me to run it when I was 17, and it was a charity run organisation. And we went from having about 12 kids, I think we had in total, up to about 60 kids over the course of 12 months.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was kids from underprivileged backgrounds and from low income areas. And so I've always been very passionate about trying to kind of allow as many people to sing as possible. And that's kind of how it's always gone. And then I was, again, very lucky. I keep saying lucky because I think it is luck. When I was 21, I was off on my first tour straight out of drama school. And then I got asked, when I came straight off of the tour, I finished the tour, and I was asked to go and teach at GSA just as a cover teacher, because that was obviously where I studied. And then I was also offered a job at Mount View as well. So I was kind of the youngest teacher there at that point.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so I've kind of been in higher education ever since.
Yeah.
And I currently teach at Trinity Laban Conservatoire, the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. And I also am the senior musical theatre consultant at Associated Studios, and we've just validated our new MA that we're starting in September, which is exciting. So that's kind of like what I do day to day. Is I do lots of that. I still keep fairly freelance though, so even though I do lots of work in lots of these colleges, because I love to travel, and I love working with singers from different places around the world, and seeing how different training is dependent on culture and dependent on access to training, which was obviously a big problem where I came from. And I try to go, obviously pandemic means this year will not be a goer, but I travel out to Singapore once a year, and I tend to travel around that part of Asia teaching. Like I said, I lived in Tokyo for a while and taught out there as well as performed. And I run courses all over Central Europe as well. So the main course I run is based in Holland and the Netherlands, in the south of the Netherlands actually, which has been running 10 years now. So,
wow.
Yeah, so we do, it's a week-long intensive, and at the end of the week, everybody sits an LCM musical theatre exam. It's a bit mad. So they do an exam in a week,
Wow.
right up until LLCM diploma. We're a little bit crazy. We kind of, obviously we tell them that they need to be practicing in advance and stuff. They don't come in cold, but everybody kind of does an exam in a week, and we do that once a year. And so
that's so exciting.
We've had people now obviously do their ALCM diploma after having first came to us and doing their grade 1 when we first started the course, which is really really exciting, because, you know, when I used to teach younger people, it was very interesting that you know, you very rarely saw somebody from grade 1 right the way through to something like the ALCM, because of course they would go to high school, or they would only come in high school and they would already have done a couple of grades, or, you know, so you only ever see them at one side of the picture. But actually we've had quite a few of them go all the way from the beginning.
That's
right
amazing. Yeah. So we've had a lovely, thank you so much. That was a great idea, you know, sort of hearing how you started and went into education. What about your relationship with your voice? I mean, do you feel like you're in a place now where you've sort of achieved vocal freedom for yourself? Can you go off and sing whatever you want to? Where are you in your journey?
That's an interesting question that I seem to revisit more and more as I get older and hopefully wiser. I, a couple of years ago, actually suffered from quite bad MTD. And I was still teaching full time, and my range shrunk to just about less than an octave.
Gosh.
And it took quite extensive osteopathy to kind of help me out, and it was all stress related. I think I was overworking and just not looking after myself and that kind of thing. But actually it was kind of a blessing in disguise, because I really feel like it gave me the opportunity to pay attention to myself and look at the bigger picture of what I give as a singing teacher and what I look like as a person in that picture, rather than just a student. And I started to kind of like take my own training more seriously than I had done since I was full-time performing. And so I feel like now I'm in a better place of vocal freedom than certainly I was, 2015, 2016. However, I think it always changes, and I think that my voice is so intrinsically linked with who I am as a person and what I believe and how I see the world, that depending on what I am striving towards in that particular moment will kind of like change how I feel about how free my voice is. And I think the word freedom is quite an interesting word as it is anyway, because, we spend so much time putting the voice in a certain place, but then trying to collate that with the idea of freedom, that actually I don't think I really understood freedom or really what that meant to my voice until I was sitting on the side of the table as a singing teacher, until I was trying to explore that with others. I don't think I found that as a singer at all until much, much later on. I have a bit of a kind of me getting on my soapbox moment often when I kind of suggest to people that we have a bit of a problem in our industry where we almost encourage the students to believe that they're fully fledged singers by the time they leave 3 years of drama training, or fully fledged dancers or fully fledged actors. And I think that is dishonest to ourselves and dishonest to them, because actually what I have found in terms of vocal freedom, in terms of being able to sing things that I would never have otherwise have sung, or just having the confidence to sound bad, or all of the things that come with that, I really feel like it's really important to kind of let students see that actually all we do is we just, if we let go of the ego of who we are as teachers and who we were or are as performers, then what we are giving them is the ability to continue to use the tools rather than the importance of the tools themselves. And I think certainly a lot of the lessons that I learned at drama school, I didn't really learn until I was in my 30s. And kind of like thinking back on all those moments when my teacher Kathy, or when I was at Knightswood, I was being taught by Graham Dickey and or Gillian, or any of these other people that have influenced me, like, they've probably said something that I kind of nodded and smiled and thought I completely wholeheartedly believed, but wasn't really able to embody or really understand in my own voice and my own way until much, much later on, or until I was trying to describe it to somebody else or try and get somebody else to embody it in their way. And I think I take great joy in that journey. And I think that's the other thing as well. I don't think that, particularly in the musical theatre industry, you can have a sense of freedom when you're 21 years old and you're desperate for a job. You can't enjoy your art in the way that I can now that I'm on the other side of it.
Absolutely.
And I think that enjoyment is probably the right word. I am very lucky to live with a musical director, Ben Papworth. And so I have kind of like a pianist at my beck and call. And I do play quite well myself, but there's just something wonderful about somebody playing piano and you just being able to sing along and not worrying about the audition that's coming up and not worrying about the fact that you're going to be performing for thousands of people. And although I loved the experience of doing those things, I think freedom for me has been finding the pleasure in being able to just be my own artist, even if that's just around the piano in the living room with my housemate.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
So what do you find most valuable in caring for your own voice these days?
Rest.
Yeah.
and sleep and diet is a big one. This is the second podcast I've been on. I was asked to do a podcast about body image with my housemate, and we were talking about it and about how when I was 21, I was the skinniest person you've ever met in your entire life, and I'd eat several pizzas in one go and kind of like be completely fine. That's not the case anymore. But as particularly for males, I think metabolism, has a lot to do with the way that your body and your mood and your kind of like and indeed your voice and your personality and all these other things kind of connect with one another, and particularly I found it quite difficult towards the end of my 20s, going into my 30s, to bring all those things together. I think that was obviously when I ended up with some issues, albeit thankfully quite mild. And really taking the opportunity to look after yourself is really important. And I think that's one of the things that I do as a teacher, like, and try and pass on to students all the time, is that they often feel that the next time they're going to sing, whether it be in a performance class at drama school, whether it be an assessment for the end of year, whether it be their first West End edition, whether it be their 20 millionth West End edition, or whether it be their press night, or whether it be 7 months into the tour that they've already been on for 12 years, or whatever stage it is that they're at. Singers suffer from a condition where they believe that the next performance they're going to perform is the most important performance of their lives. And I certainly used to feel like that all the time. And I think one of the things that I use to really care for myself and my voice now is to kind of contextualize it and realize that actually what I would love would be to still be able to sing in my 60s, 70s and 80s. Like that ability to still be able to get that buzz that I feel, and that kind of that endorphin release that I feel whenever I kind of engage with music, with using my voice, and kind of being able to pass that on to students to be like, look, at the end of the day, if you're not meant to be on stage that night because you have laryngitis, stop taking vocal zones and just go to bed.
Yeah.
Or, and kind of like really taking that opportunity to recontextualize what my voice means to me has made me care for it better.
Yes.
I think the rather flippant way perhaps that I used to kind of engage with my voice as a young man, luckily I have quite a robust instrument, and so therefore it kind of always worked for me. But I know that that's not always true. And I know that it certainly wouldn't be true nowadays if I was to be as flippant as I was when I was kind of 21, 22, 23. So I think for me, the thing that really helps me look after it is contextualizing the fact that I want to kind of keep it for a long period of time, and I want to stay healthy, and I want to feel good when I sing. And I don't feel good if I'm standing in front of, thousands of people feeling really sick, knowing that the top note's not going to come out unless I scream at the top of my voice.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
I think it's all part of it.
So is there anything
Completely.
that you've learned now, or in the years since you've been coaching and working with other voices, that you wished you'd learned sooner when you were a sort of pre-drama school youngster? What are the real light bulb moments that you've had that you wish you could have learned earlier, really?
Not to get hung up on methodology or any technique for that matter. To work with the voice that I have rather than the voice that I think I had, or the voice that I wished I had,
or the voice we think we're supposed to sound like when we sing that song.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes, exactly that. Yeah. I think that that's a really important thing, that it's, for me, because I'm quite a sciencey kind of guy. I was always kind of obsessed. Oh yeah, but where does the idea come from? And okay, but like I want to know everything about, why I'm being asked to do that technique, and why I need to move my larynx in that way, or engage my breath in that way, or use my articulation in that way. And I think, although that's been incredibly helpful in my overall life, I think the way in which I let it control my choices was probably to my detriment when I was younger, and freeing people up to kind of make choices based on their creative expression and their kind of like artistic integrity is something I feel really, really, really passionate about. And I really feel like, in fact, it's something we're talking about today. So I was teaching the teachers that I teach on a Sunday about monomythic story structure and comparative mythology, and how if we understand the contexts of where a song is in the hero's journey, then we can make better choices simply from that, which we actually already know lots about inherently because we've seen a million movies and we've read a million books and we've seen a million shows on stage, and how we can influence ourselves much more somatically perhaps, or much more holistically, or just much more in a kind of in a more healthy way, rather than kind of frustrating over the small stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think one of the things, and like you said about teaching young professionals and people who want to go into drama school, the devil is in the detail, but focusing on the right details is important.
Yeah.
And that's certainly something that I haven't discovered until much later on in my life, and until I started teaching full time, and learn to allow them to make their own mistakes, even if they're mistakes you know because you made them yourself. And I think that like those are the moments I think back on from being a young singer, those moments when my teachers and the people that influenced me allowed me to make the mistake. They didn't kind of like spoil the surprise for me for certain things, you know, that actually I have learned much more. I have much more tacit knowledge over certain things because I kind of was given the freedom to not get it right first time.
Absolutely. What voices inspire you, and who could you never tire of listening to? So who really brings you joy?
Okay. Oh, so many. David Phelps is just such an inspiring voice. You know, I came for the technique and I stayed for the artistry is kind of how I feel about him. You know, like, you know, as a singer, as a young singer, hearing that voice and kind of going, oh my God, he can do everything, and he can sing as high as possible and as low as possible, and he can sing so many different styles, and he can sing kind of operatically, and now he's belting out rock, and just the versatility of what the instrument could do was what really kind of connected me to him as a singer. But what makes me listen to him all these years later is his desire to communicate something that he really truly believes in. I am not religious at all. I'm a humanist, or that's probably the best way to describe me. But I absolutely have such respect for the message that he's trying to send with his music, you know. And as a singing teacher, as I constantly try to strive for my students to understand what it is to sing truthfully, to see somebody that really genuinely can only sing from a place of truth is something that is inspiring and amazing, and just wonderful to have in the world. So I really love his voice. Norm Lewis is my musical theatre idol.
Okay.
As the musical theatre male idol anyway. His voice is just smooth as butter. It really, really is. And again, another incredibly expressive artist, but the kind of subtlety with which he's able to kind of use his voice is just, to me, perfection. And that resonance and that tone that he can just apply to anything. Stagey Moment, I have actually met him, and his speaking voice is just as beautiful as his singing voice.
Oh, wow.
And it's just an absolute joy to just kind of like hear this man open his mouth and express anything.
Yes.
He could read a shopping list and I would listen to it for hours on end. I love Leontine Price.
Yes.
It's my favourite opera singer
Absolutely.
of all time. My favourite opera singer of all time. Again, I think I engage with people that really have something to say with their voices.
Yeah.
Because if you really have something to say, then you often say it well. and so I feel like you can't really separate those things out. I actually have this on a keychain somewhere that a student made for me because I say it so often. But I have a very simple definition for technique, and that's technique is the ability to make choices to tell a story. And so for me, voices that really speak to me are those that really inhabit the story that they're trying to tell, whether that is a story about their faith or whether that is a story from the point of view of a character in an opera or a musical or whatever. And I feel like often it's said that back in the day, Maria Callas was the actor out of the two of them. I don't think that's necessarily fair, because when you watch Leontine Price perform, every single utterance is just so full of heart and so full of desire to kind of make her point clear, and again, utterly inspiring voice.
That's really wonderful.
I mean, I could literally go on for days, but I would say that those are probably my top three. I think David Phelps is incredibly interesting as an artist to me because he is at his best when he's doing his Christian music. So I have seen him in concert where he's performed Nessun Dorma and Bring Him Home and all the kind of like tenor classics.
Yeah.
And then in amongst that, obviously done a lot of his own material, because he writes a lot of his own songs and kind of collaborates and designs a lot of the solo work that he does for himself. And so my advice would be, if anybody really wants to hear David Phelps at his best, to listen to the songs that he's written himself, listen to his Christian music, any of it.
Yeah.
All of it's just as good as the rest. For Norm Lewis, I can deliver you directly to a track which is just stunning. In fact, again, all of his tracks are stunning. He released an album called This Is the Life, I think the album's called. I think it was his first album, perhaps.
Okay.
I could be wrong. Of a collection of different songs, and there's some real crackers on that. But if you want to hear a bass baritone singing a top B or B flat or whatever it is, with complete ease, then listen to him sing something like a Go the Distance from Hercules or something like that.
Yeah.
But the song that really got me into listening to Norm Lewis was from the kind of live concert album of William Finn's songs. I honestly can't remember what the album's called, but Norm Lewis sings a song called Anytime, and it's from the musical Elegies by William Finn. And he did an arrangement of that for that concert with William Finn on piano, and it is just the most beautiful song ever. And with Leontine Price, there's a video of her singing some Verdi. La Forza del Destino, and it's just her in concert singing this wonderful aria, and it just is so delicious, and a really good place to start if you've never experienced her voice before. Because she gives you it all. She gives you the very top, she gives you the bottom, she gives you the drama, she gives you the float, she gives you everything that you want, and stuff that you didn't even realise you needed to hear when she sings that aria.
It was a few weeks ago, wasn't it? And you posted this thing and I read it and I was like, oh my God, I'm so on the same page as you right now, because I see this too. And I don't know if you want to talk about any of these things that get your goat as a teacher, but I just thought if, we could raise awareness here, couldn't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so happy to. I'm kind of known as being kind of the outspoken teacher anyway, so this is quite comfortable territory for me.
Cool.
I'm a big believer in social justice and equality. And I really feel like, with everything that's going on in the world, we need to look after each other first and foremost. Particularly in the musical theatre sphere, we've seen that there is quite a lot of problems, but musical theatre is not the only one. Of course, the opera world has been full of this for hundreds of years, and the pop world kind of like has its own thing. But there's even news this past week which is concerning this issue, and that's the issue of the representation of POC and BAME singers and actors and artists, and I think it goes beyond that though, because I think there's something to be said about representation of LGBTQ themes in song and on stage and in stories, and particularly representation for people who are genderqueer and trans and non-binary, who are often very understood even within the LGBT community. I want to preface this by saying that the reason why I talk in quite kind of harsh terms about all of this is because I feel like, or we're not allowing a platform for everybody's stories to be told, then everybody is missing out, not just people of colour, not just LGBTQ people. We're all missing out on the richness of global culture, and actually speaking for more equality in that particular view is something that is essential to my students, particularly those students of colour who feel that they are being underrepresented in many different ways, which I'm more than happy to speak about. But also for all of us that actually should be learning about the world in much greater terms, that theatre should be educational as well as entertaining, and that doesn't always mean kind of like overtly teaching lessons, but just like living by those lessons to kind of just encourage others to kind of question what is important to them and what the difference is between right and wrong, perhaps for them and their lives is. And the post that I know that you're referring to is the one where I was asking about particularly about repertoire choices and the suitability of repertoire choices for singers with regards to kind of their ethnic and racial background, and whether or not we should be allowing students who have inherent white privilege, because like you and myself, they are ethnically white, whether those are the right people to be telling Black stories and be inhabiting that particular space. And I think the reason why I feel strongly about this is because although we don't necessarily feel in our industry like we are holding people of colour back, the inherent bias that we place on theatre, and actually even the fact that lessons cost quite a bit of money, and the kind of the socioeconomic situation around about it, does mean that we, especially at drama school level, see less applicants of colour than we do white applicants. I feel like if we encourage more Black and ethnic minority or people of colour artists to come forward and inhabit their own stories and inhabit the stories of others, then that's going to be the thing that's going to encourage more people, and we'll get more representation within the industry. I'm part of a kind of working group at the moment that's kind of talking about a very specific situation in a very specific school, and we're looking at ways to kind of like help that situation. And a story that stuck out to me from the initial conversation was a female who comes from an Indian heritage background, but was brought up by white parents, and so was brought up in a very white part of Scotland, and had lots of experiences in kind of white schools, but actually still had some kind of diverse mix within the school that she could associate with, and she wanted to apply for a performing arts school, and her mum took her along to see it. And she said to her mum afterwards, she says, "I don't see anybody that looks like me on that stage, so I don't want to apply." And I feel if we are encouraging, white students, whether they be young or old, to inhabit those Black stories, I feel like that may further that disencouragement that these young people of colour feel, when actually we should be building them up and we should be encouraging them and going, look, there is material here that's for you, that speaks to you and speaks of your experiences and experiences of people of your culture and your background and your ethnicity, and your heritage and your ancestral heritage, and please come and join us.
Yeah.
And I feel like unless we really shout that loud, then we're going to be losing out on so much talent. And I mean, if you look at the 2 of the 3 people, so 2/3 of the people that I have said that I absolutely adore as the best singers in the world are people of color. And if we think about potentially how many incredible voices we've already lost, you know, to kind of the lack of encouragement that perhaps we are complicit in by just ignoring the problem. And so I really try my best, which is probably not good enough, but I will keep trying harder, and I'll keep learning, and I'll keep growing, because I believe that we all need to try and find a way to consistently encourage people, whether they be from disadvantaged backgrounds or whether they be from different backgrounds or cultures, to engage in the act of singing and performing and being artists, because we all have stories to tell, and the day that we can all tell them equally and have representation within those stories is the day that we will, you know, we will actually probably have a better society for it.
Yes, you have to hope so, don't you?
Absolutely.
I'm so along for the journey, and I you are doing great work because you're talking about it. You're using your voice, you're spreading your message.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm all about as well. And I feel very compelled to thank you, because it's important that, you know, if nobody talks about these things, then nothing changes.
Absolutely.
And, you know, yeah, you're right. There does need to be a turning of the tables with all of this.
Absolutely. You know, and I had 2 students who came to me and said, you know, we've never had a teacher that looks like us, and we don't feel like we are being kind of like properly represented, because so many of the white teachers that we have don't even want to discuss our ethnicity, don't want to discuss our race with us, because they're worried about, you know, insulting us or being offensive. But in some ways, it's offensive to ignore the fact that I am who I am and you are who you are, and actually that's why they came to me, because I was the only teacher that was kind of openly kind of, you know, getting them to think about that in terms of like how that will either positively or negatively impact their lives going forward as artists, and kind of like the specific concerns that they feel that they might need to look into, or, you know, and as a white man, you know, I have ridiculous amounts of privilege and I can't speak to those experiences a lot of the time. But I've been connecting these students up, and I'm continuing, and hopefully going to be creating something to connect these students up in a much bigger way to other artists who can speak to that experience. And I feel like it's really important that as a white man of privilege, that I do my bit to use my voice to make sure that these things are getting done, because if I'm in the prime position to be listened to, then I want to make sure that what people are hearing is speaking out for those that are not being listened to. That's certainly what I feel anyway.
Oh, I'm championing you. That's brilliant.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And I very much feel like, I mean, maybe coming from slightly well, we deal with different people, don't we? So I think this isn't as much of an issue, but I do find it an issue if it comes to repertoire sometimes.
I think there's a very simple rule that I kind of like tell all my students, that one of the smallest casting brackets in the world are characters who are white. Because actually, there's millions of characters out there. Only a very small proportion of them have to be white.
That's very true.
And I think that's the thing that we need to remember. And I think that, yes, there are loads of roles out there that are specifically for people who are Hispanic or are Black or who are Asian or whatever kind of like, however you want to divide it, that shouldn't be played by people who are not speaking from that experience. There are very, very few roles that are very specifically white. So, like, for instance, one of them in musical theatre would be like Amber the Von Tussles in Hairspray. So both the mother and the daughter have to be white, and Tracy probably has to be white as well, because she is allowed on the show. And so when you've got a situation like that, you do absolutely have characters that have to be in order to make the story make sense. But I think we need to be encouraging casting directors as well. This isn't a thing about teachers. It's about the whole industry, and encouraging casting directors to be much broader minded about it as well.
Definitely.
And that actually lip service is not enough, and saying, oh, but we you know, if a person that was in a wheelchair is the most talented person, then we'll cast them in a show. Then why haven't you? Because I'm pretty sure that there has been an opportunity where there's been somebody with some kind of disability or some kind of difference about them that has been the most talented person in the room, but you've still chosen to go the other way, and which is just the way it goes, you know. But like, it's time, I think, for us to really embolden our students as well, embolden our singers to realize that they're the ones to change
That's amazing.
things for the better. And I really believe that is an ethos of mine.
Me too.
Yeah.
Amazing. Who's getting it right then? I mean, how do you feel about like Lin-Manuel Miranda and Hamilton and the way that cast works? Is that getting it right?
Yeah, I think what Lin has done has been to speak to his experience first as a writer, and then expand that experience out so that he includes his friends and the people around about him, you know? So if you look at something like In the Heights, that really spoke to his experience and his upbringing.
Yes.
And then Hamilton really spoke to the experience of all of those people that he cast in that show and their collective experience as you know, as non-white Americans.
Yes.
And what it felt to be a non-white American, and what history felt like to them. And what's been amazing about Lin-Manuel Miranda's work is that he's really spoken to white youth through these stories. So he's literally taught like a whole generation of white youths and my young white students about oppression and about, you know, about issues that they otherwise would have kind of like, it's slightly uncomfortable for us to talk about that, so we're not going to talk about that, you know, like, which was the way that I was certainly brought up, and not necessarily by my parents, but even just down to things like history, you know, like we learn about World War I and World War II. We don't learn about the colonization of the British Empire across the world and the effects that had, and we don't learn about slavery, and we don't, you know, so kind of like, it's, you know, teachers could say that it's because we don't have enough time, but, you know, but important. I think Lin-Manuel Miranda has made time to actually teach, you know. I've got 12-year-old students that come into me and kind of like can talk very coherently and very concisely about these issues, and can put them in ways that they really understand and are very accurate. And that's been done because of musical theatre.
I know, I love that. That's the side of it where it's educational as well as being entertaining. And as long as there are writers out there doing that, I think that's going to really help turn the tide, I hope.
Absolutely. I really I'm not going to mention anybody by name. I'm just going to say the whole team of the British Black Theatre Awards have done an incredible job over the past couple of years that they've been running to really highlight black theatre and black people in theatre in the United Kingdom, and I think that that's a really incredible organisation, and the work that they've done has been really wonderful. I think they're a real mover and shaker, because they've really made people realise that it's time to really kind of look at this way more comprehensively than perhaps has been looked at before.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this year is, I mean, even since lockdown, hasn't it? There's just been so much more, and people are sitting back. And I just hope people listen as well, because sometimes people have got a lot to say with their voices, but they don't always become an active listener. And I think that's where I wanted to bring the podcast in. Let's help people to just sit back with a cuppa and listen.
And absolutely. Yeah. You know, and like, and realize that it's okay to completely disagree with everything I've just said, you know, but as long as you open up that conversation, and you're willing to listen to the other side, I think that's how we move forward, which is the same. But like, one thing I do want to highlight actually as a singing teacher, and it's something that I've been thinking about very recently, has been how technique and even the way that we talk about the voice can often be kind of like inaccurate because it's been slightly whitewashed. So when I started teaching in Asia, when I was very lucky to be asked to go to Singapore, one of the terms that's used in drama schools, because a lot of the drama schools are very Stilian based in the United Kingdom, it's very, very easy to get people into kind of like modal register into kind of their M1 space by just going, okay, use a bit of speech quality. But you can't use that when people are not from the West. Those kind of techniques are actually very much, and those triggers are very much techniques for a white American population. And that's not to say that people who are not of that can't connect with it. But if you say to somebody from Singapore, okay, use your speech quality, they're not going to be speaking in the same speech quality that you expect from somebody from East London. And actually kind of understanding those differences is actually going to improve our understanding of how we can teach technique to students as well. And that's not necessarily about doing loads of studies about how the voice necessarily works any better. It's actually about doing cultural studies and about how culture actually influences culture influences technique and the approach to kind of using the voice as well, which I think is really important.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. So we've just about come to the hour. So I just wondered if there's anything you'd like to share with our listeners that you may have coming up that might be of interest, or your social medias and all that sort of thing. Where can people find you if they want to come learn more?
Yeah, okay, so people can learn more by coming to my website. So I am www.scottharrisonvoice.com, and that's Scott with 2 T's and Harrison with 2 R's and 1 S. And you can find me on Twitter. I think it's sh_vocal coach. You can also find me on Facebook, I'm sure, if you look hard enough, but there's no real way to kind of like link you to that. But you can find me on my website. Something that I've got coming up, I like I said, I run lots of teacher development courses there, and at the minute I've been doing it essentially for the young teachers that have been doing the teacher training course with me out in Holland, but it's kind of got a bit out of hand and kind of expanded to loads of other people. But I'm kind of doing it, it's only £10 a class, and basically we've had loads of really interesting people. We do it every 2 weeks. I'm taking a couple of weeks off at the minute because I'm doing some other things, but to keep an eye out for that. So we've had the wonderful Jessie De Silva, who's assistant professor at Berkeley College in the United States, come and speak to our students about inclusion. We've had the wonderful Kathy Taylor-Jones come and talk to us about psychology of singing and psychology of performance and psychology of teaching. We've got loads of other wonderful guests coming very soon as well as me talking and doing my little bit as well. And we just kind of cover all the kind of different areas of things that perhaps you wouldn't necessarily cover if you went and did the CVT course, or you did a course on bel canto, classical singing or whatever. Like, we're wanting to fill the gaps, so we're going to be doing a class on looking at reflective practitionership and how to be a better reflective practitioner, and using multiple intelligence theory to kind of like embolden your use of technique and all that kind of stuff. So that's one of the things I'm doing. I'm also about to launch a little YouTube channel as well, which you can find about on my website as well. It's called Practice Makes Almost Perfect. And it's going to be kind of singing based, but it's not really. It's really going to be for anybody that wants to practice or learn a skill of any description, because the act of practicing is a technique in itself that we often forget about. And so I want to create loads of videos where I'll be giving people loads of kind of like hints and tips as to kind of like the best way to kind of do this. I'm also going to be interviewing some of the best practicers in the world from loads of different fields, which is going to be super exciting. And that's coming hopefully in the next couple of weeks when I get around to doing it. So keep a lookout for that as well. But you can find everything on my website.
That's amazing, Scott. Thank you so much. I'm definitely going to keep up with everything you're up to, and you might find me booking on one of your Sundays before too long. Who knows?
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, and thank you so much for doing this. This honestly, and please don't cut this out the podcast. I really want people to hear that this is so needed and so appreciated by everybody in the community. And thank you so much for everything that you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you for joining me on the Vocal Freedom Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed the episode, and we'll move into your day. with a bit more vocal freedom, feeling that you can express using your voice and let the world hear what you have to say. Visit culturetovoiceacademy.com/podcast. Sign up to be kept informed as new episodes are published and consider joining our online community. Membership to this will allow you to post questions to our guests, link you to show notes, social media links, and entitle you to exclusive offers from our guests. See you next time.